In what way is it expensive to be poor? My car has a leaky seal on the transmission. It'd be about $250 to replace the seal and flush the transmission. I don't have $250, so I keep topping up the fluid and keep driving it because I'll never get $250 if I don't get to work. But, in time, that's going to destroy the transmission, which will be about $1,200 to replace. I saw a lady coming out of a laundromat, loading her baskets of clothes into a taxi. There is zero other public transport where I saw this happen and only a few taxis. Not being able to put enough money together at one time to buy a car or a washing machine. She probably rented, so this maybe wasn't even an option. Was costing her a fortune. Just being nickeled and dimed to death. I've seriously walked my laundry basket over a mile to the bus stop on a regular basis. Not fun times. Laundromats are expensive as heck too. There are late fees for everything. Overdraft fees at the bank. Crappy jobs usually don't have good healthcare plans. If you're poor, you need credit cards just to survive, but interest rates are higher for those with low credit scores. See late fees above. Crappy cars are always breaking down, and that's expensive. If you're ever desperate enough to take out a title payday loan, you'll discover you just stepped in financial quicksand. When bank fees are waived if you keep more than $X amount in your account, but they start charging for the account when the amount drops under the minimum. Yep, these happened to me after the outbreak. $1K minimum balance or we start charging your poor butt. Renting to own anything is really bad. You pay 4x the value of whatever it is you're renting to own. And if you miss a payment they repossess it and someone else might start at the beginning of attempting to pay for it again. Not only that, you very well might be paying 4x the new value for a used item. And only low quality items are sold rent to own. Ashley Furniture, crappy used cars, the cheapest big screen TVs available at wholesale. Houses might be better, but Rent-A-Center and JD by Redder are worse than loan sharks. You can seldom buy in bulk, so you end up paying more for things. For example, our local butchery sells ground beef cheap if you buy 2 kilograms or more at a time. If you're paid weekly and can afford only 500 grams per week, you end up paying more. Buying in bulk is a huge money saver, and it's so dang expensive. You don't just need the money in advance to buy the groceries. You also need a freezer or cooler large enough to store it, and of course a vehicle to get it home. So many things to prepay before you can start saving. Mental health, or more specifically stress. You will always have stress about future, always making decisions based on your poverty so that it won't affect your situation in bad way. Fun fact, once this mindset is there, you can't earn your way out of it, or at least I haven't figured out how to yet. The justice system. If you can't pay a fine, the state will make things more expensive by adding fees on top of fees on top of fees. Then they will incarcerate you for not paying the inflated fees. Then you have to pay the parole officer who is keeping an eye on you while you care, unable to get a job that pays enough to pay him. If you're poor, you already have no or very little money to invest in yourself, so you have to take on debt to do so. If you want to get technical certifications or degrees, sometimes there's financial assistance, but a lot of the time taking on loans is necessary. I'll add that when you have less money, the power relationship is flipped in nearly every financial interaction you have. When you have money, banks and companies compete to get access to your reliable spending, be it with low interest rates on borrowing or better deals for early payment. They have to compete because you have the option to go to someone else who will gladly take your payment history and stable income. You're a safe bet, so you have the luxury of choice. When you don't have money, institutions know you have nowhere else to go, so they happily gouge you, knowing agreeing to horrendous loan terms is your only option. I teach econ and always remind my kids that commercials boasting about no credit, low credit, no problem know exactly who they're getting in the door. The people who have nowhere else to go. Food deserts, where everything at the single grocery store for miles around is marked way the heck up because its shoppers usually pay in food stamps and or have nowhere else to go. Laundry. Imagine needing an entire morning, afternoon to load and lug your crap to a hot building and feeding machines quarter after quarter after quarter while being tethered to the spot so your stuff won't get stolen. Everything is expensive when you're poor. Jokes aside, this is true. I've been poor for most of my life and I'm still not in a great financial situation. And the biggest problem is that you not only don't have a lot of money, but all the prices stay the same. So literally anything that you buy feels like a fortune. I walked to the grocery store to buy some stuff to make a special dinner on my daughter's birthday and I spent about $100. About $20 I think. IDK. And I swear I'd win an Oscar for how I kept my poker face. The second I walked out of the store I bursted out crying. Everyone on the street could see me crying as I walked back home. Seeing my daughter's smile later that day during dinner made me feel a lot better, but those are $120 really hurt. Debt. Basically if you're poor you need to borrow some money to either get a house or buy food, and after a while the debt keeps getting bigger and bigger. The fact that they charge interest on interest is beyond fricked up. The quality of stuff you're able to buy. For example, someone struggling for cash will buy a pair of shoes for £5 that last for a short period of time and need to be replaced every 2 months. And someone who is more well off can afford to buy a pair of shoes for £40 which last about 2 years. Therefore at the end of the 2-year period the poorer person has spent around £120. I spent $300 for a pair of boots and I've been wearing them for the past 5 years. $80 books get replaced every year. Considering that I'm pretty sure I can squeeze many more years out of my current pair, I am saving money now. Biggest one that I always think of for all my fellow Americans is medical care. If you're poor you put off medical care as long as possible, and it's extremely expensive by the time it's serious enough to address. In every manner. If you want healthy food, that costs. But eating cheap food, while sustaining, will inevitably lead to poor health. Bad health will cost you. If you want to not be stressed, and stress is huge when it comes to health, then that means not having to worry is kind of an integral part of poverty. Stress means less awesome interpersonal relationships, means less sleep, means overwork to try to make ends meet. Good interpersonal relationships, getting enough sleep, and not working yourself to exhaustion are things that help you stay alive. Mentally, you now have a running total of how much everything in your life costs. I guarantee you that every poor person knows precisely, how much milk costs, or gasoline, or a bus pass, or the subscription to Netflix that brings them just a little joy, and if they can afford it or not. There are no coins in their couches. $5 to discover in an old coat. They need that money and they know where it is. And if not, now they have to spend time, another expense, dealing with debt collectors, or people at utility agencies or banks or government offices, trying to negotiate and navigate systems that may or may not be willing to help them, regardless of that system's original intent. Poverty is merely the accumulation of expenses that one cannot pay, and once you are poor, there is a system in place to ensure that you never, ever run out of those expenses. Tires. Used tires cost 1/3 price and get about 20% of the life of a new tire. Also you are paying mount and balance every time, plus worry about blowouts. Even a new tire at $80 with a 30k mileage expectancy, or a $100 tire at 65k mileage warranty, over twice the life, little more than 20% in extra charge. Not sure if it's the same in the US, but in the UK, we often have cheap Chinese tires, known colloquially as Yinglong ditch finders. It's quite alarming getting wheel spin with 45 horsepower, but hey, 4 of those cost the same as one decent tire. You have to buy a cheap, unreliable car. That will inevitably cost you more in repairs, poor fuel economy, higher insurance, etc. As prices go up, and minimum wage stays consistent, it's completely expensive to be poor. We're paying all of our checks for food and rent, and we have no wiggle room. I told my wife, who's been making $14 an hour for 5 years now, that if you aren't getting a 2% raise every year, inflation, then you're losing money. She's already $1 plus less an hour than she was making when she started working there. Low-paying jobs can also be physically harmful, i.e. factory work, and you can be treated like garbage because it's cheaper to pay out the occasional lawsuit and medical expenses rather than resign the factory and make it less efficient to be safer. Just watch a video about a factory worker who died of COVID and the company was fined $15k. The poor dude's funeral costed more than $15k. I once had to pay money so I could set up a payment plan because I had no money. Because I was too broke, I had a bunch of late fees, so a $100 ticket ended up being around $1,500 when all was said and done. Being unable to pay for education is the most expensive way of staying poor, and don't come with scholarship and that stuff. It is expensive AF, and even more if you are like me from a poor third world country. The laundromat. My washer broke and holy crap, that's pricey. Shopping. I get to drive around and go to the cheapest stores. Ironically, the 2 chain grocery stores near the projects are the priciest ones. In certain parts of British Columbia, you have to pay a fine if you're caught panhandling. Homeless people literally have to pay money for asking for money. You can't afford to buy a place and essentially throw the money away into rent instead of paying off a house and being able to sell it after. Healthcare. Was poor basically my whole life and now have to pay thousands for surgeries, and the health insurance covers almost nothing. Shopping at errands and rent a center. My parents waste so much money paying lower monthly payments when they could just save up to buy furniture up front, which would cost way less in the long run. No money to invest in a retirement fund, stock market, etc. With inflation you're losing money, if you have any saved up at all. Out of necessity, the poor spend more money than they make, getting further and further into debt and expensive finance charges. As an example, buying crappy shoes every 3 months because it constantly breaks is more costly than a rich person buying ultra expensive shoes that will last for the rest of his life. But they just sit in the closet. Being unable to buy things in cash means financing multiple purchases at once, so someone could, theoretically, have monthly payments for a school laptop, car, apartment, furniture, large appliance like a fridge, care credit balances for unexpected medical needs, and credit cards for past emergencies they're still paying off. This puts such a squeeze on the smaller income that when the next unexpected expense comes along, like a car repair or AC blowing, it has nowhere to go but on credit, making the hole even deeper. You put off regular service for your car and, eventually, that creates a bigger problem. You can pay as much in rent as somebody else does for a mortgage payment, but you don't have anything to show for it in the end. Banking. It has always blown my mind how predatory banks are on lower income people while all the people with plenty of money get every fee possible waived even though they can easily afford it. There is the phrase, buy nice or buy twice. It basically means that you should buy the nicer product because you'll need to replace it less often. For those people who can't buy nice, they are forced to buy an inferior product multiple times. An example is work boots. A $100 pair of boots may last 5 years. A $20 pair of boots may last 6 months. If you can't afford $100 boots, then by the time 5 years is up, you would have already spent $200 on cheap boots. I prefer the flip phrase buy twice. Buy nice, aka, I buy cheap the first time, which is normally good enough, but on the odd occasion I use something often I find out quickly enough and upgrade on my next purchase. In every way, you can only afford stuff that breaks, can't afford good healthcare which will lead to bigger health problems, stressed about how you will be able to afford rent stuff. Not money expensive, but time expensive. Everything takes longer, and you always have to wait. The bus, the laundromat, the store, the line for money orders or check cashing. Before they installed the self-check registers, the Walmart near my work was guaranteed to have a 10-minute wait in line, no matter when you went. Once, there were 42 people in each of the only 2 lines open, at 7 PM, on a Friday. I thought, they can only get away with this because these people have no other choice. There's no way the store in the nice neighborhood up the road would ever allow that. Their customers would have a fit. Higher interest rates, late fees, penalties, deposits, etc. A decade ago I had to pay an $800 deposit just to get the hydro hooked up in my new apartment because I didn't have room on a credit card for automatic billing at the time. I had a head injury and was on disability at the time, so they required the deposit. My bill never goes over $43 per month. It's continuous bulls like that, with poorer people being penalized for everything. Now that I've been back in the workforce for several years and making a decent income, and haven't been late with any of my payments, I still can't get that deposit back until I move. You also can't afford higher quality goods the first time, so you end up replacing lower quality items over and over. You also can't get the higher points credit cards because your income isn't high enough to qualify for those cards. I have an everyday card I use, but I could get 3x the points that I do now for spending the exact same money if I earned $40,000 more annually than I do now. There's a reason it's called buying power. The operative word is power. You also can't afford to ever buy in bulk. One time my car died on me. The cost of repair was almost 5 times the value of the entire car. I worked a job in basically the middle of nowhere. It paid better than any job I'd ever had, but still pretty poor by most standards. No bus or public transport went to this location or anywhere near within walking distance. So I desperately needed a car. I had been smart enough to save money for a rainy day, pinching pennies, skipping meals. I had enough to buy a decent used vehicle with the money I had. I told my boss about my misfortune. I bummed rides from friends to go look at cars. I must have looked at 30 cars and each one was shittier than the last. Each one was gonna cost more to fix than it was worth or had obvious issues just waiting to go bad. Eventually my good graces dried up and my friends were exhausted by driving me around for hours to look at cars and not buy one, since clearly they all were crap. I started taking the bus, but that took so long I had to start calling out of work since I had no way to get there. I'd been looking at cars for almost 2 weeks and found nothing suitable. Eventually my boss got fed up and said if I didn't come in tomorrow I'd be fired. Car or no car. So I bought the next car I looked at. Deep down I knew the car was crap, but it was literally the only one I was able to even see within the time I had left, and at least it could move. I thought maybe I could scrounge up enough fresh savings and use this car to look for others down the line. I paid cash and on the way home it made some weird sounds. I knew I'd made a mistake, but at least I could get to work. I ended up sinking 3 times the value of the car into it to keep it running. But I had no other capital to buy another car and the brakes just kept coming so fast I had to plug the leaks, otherwise it'd be worse off. Which meant I wasn't ever able to save that extra to get another car. I just got stuck sinking money into a sinking ship to keep it afloat just a bit longer. This has probably been said already, but good cooking. For us, middle class now, it's easy to assemble a meal from what is in the pantry and freezer, supplemented by what's in our garden or in the stores within 3 blocks of my house. It feels thrifty, healthy, sensible, but to get to this point took a lot of investment. We have pots and pans, spices, flour, oils, vinegars, bags and cans of staples, grills, steamer, measuring devices galore. We have the knowledge of cooking that comes from being able to afford to learn what we like by going to restaurants, and having the spare time to watch cooking shows, and the energy to cook every day because we don't have 2 jobs each with long commutes. And if you don't have $500 to put together a basic kitchen, or secure private cooking space so that your investment won't immediately be soiled or stolen, you're likely going to be eating a lot of fast food, and that isn't the most nutritious foundation for the next day. Shoes. I have bought my first good sneakers 4 years ago. I have 2 pairs that I wear since then and they will easily serve at least another year. When I was buying cheap shoes I was buying about 3 pairs a year. I couldn't afford to shed so much at once. Now after 4 years I have saved half of shoe money. I'll add to this the risk of injury with bad shoes. A $20 pair of running shoes sounded like a great deal to me in college. Then shin splints were like, "Hi, we're here." The reason that the rich were so rich, Vimes reasoned, was because they managed to spend less money. Take boots, for example. He earned $38 a month plus allowances. A really good pair of leather boots cost $50, but an affordable pair of boots, which were sort of okay for a season or 2 and then leaked like heck when the cardboard gave out, cost about $10. Those were the kind of boots Vimes always bought, and wore until the soles were so thin that he could tell where he was in Ankh-Morpork on a foggy night by the feel of the cobbles. But the thing was that good boots lasted for years and years. A man who could afford $50 had a pair of boots that'd still be keeping his feet dry in 10 years time. while the poor man who could only afford cheap boots would have spent $100 on boots in the same time and would still have wet feet. This was the Captain Samuel Vimes Boots theory of socioeconomic unfairness. Vimes' quote here is what inspired this. You can't afford to shop in bulk. Every cent has to be accounted for. Prime example, my wife and I buy beef tenderloins whenever they go on sale. Usually get 2 of them. You can chop them up into steaks and get 2 end roasts off each loin. One loin costs about $80 and you get a dozen 1.5 inches steaks out of it. That comes out to around $6.07 a steak and 2 roasts for free. So we're eating $6 steaks every Friday night. But a poor person is spending $5 on half a pound of ground beef because there's no way they can afford to buy an $80 beef tenderloin, even though it's cheaper in the long run to buy the loin. Bulk toilet paper is another good example. You could buy 24 rolls for $40 or 4 rolls for $8. 24 is by far the better deal, but if every dollar is spoken for, where do you find $32 in your budget? You don't. Your health. Poor people with lack of resources are susceptible to diabetes, heart disease, mental illness, poor school, etc. Driving a beater to and from work. Yeah, you could be spending more on a car payment, or you could spend 5-10k that you don't really have or saved up for a long time to get something not on a dealer lot that runs good. Or you could buy a 30-year-old Pose for $500 1k because that's what you've got, and public transportation isn't an option for you, and be replacing $20 to $200 parts every couple weeks just to keep the dang thing running. It's even worse if you have a job as a delivery driver. Our roof is leaking. It's $1,000 to fix it. I know the water damage is happening and will be enormously expensive, but we just don't have the $1,000. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.